One of the nearly forgotten stories about the work of the Rotary Club of Taradale is that of the establishment of the Cruse Club for the widows of Taradale. This was back in 1960, just after the club had been chartered, and was the idea of foundation member Dr. Ted Morris. The Cruse Club lasted 35 years, and for the last 25 it used the Taradale Borough Council building following the amalgamation of Taradale with the Napier City Council, and that was in March 1968. But for more about the history of the Cruse Club, we're now going to talk to Peter Sugden. Peter, pleasure to be here with you this morning. What we're going to talk about is an example of Rotary providing service above self. There can be no finer example than the Taradale Cruse Club. What is the meaning of Cruse?
Well, the word Cruse comes from the Book of Kings in the Old Testament, where the widow's cruse was a vessel or container which contained either oil or food, and it was handed to Elijah by a widow, and that cruse or vessel was never empty, and so it became a expression, a symbolic expression for the widow's club to take on this name because of its purpose, which was charity, kindness and generosity.
So you've touched there, including that intro and description about the reasoning, the aims of the Cruse Club. You've mentioned a couple there.
Yep.
Mainly great support for each other.
That's right, that's right. Dr. Ted Morris, as you probably mentioned in your early piece, had a great idea that there was more to the widows than just their health, and the purpose of the Cruse Club became to relieve poverty and suffering and distress for the widows, and to provide financial assistance where needed, to provide a facility where they could meet and socialise with each other, and also to establish a panel of advisors that could help them if they had any difficulties with finances or their well-being. We've got to remember in those days, as you probably remember, the population in 1961 of Taradale was 5,000, and there were 200 widows, so there was quite a necessity, and they didn't have places like citizens bureaus and other groups that could take them on, so they were very well the first group.
If you're talking to people today and explain to them about the Cruse Club, they say, why was it really needed? But back in that time there was a great depth of need because the services were developed. And I think the importance is indicated by the wonderful press coverage, Peter, that occurred.
Yep, that's right. They didn't have the senior citizens and they didn't have the Friendship Centre, but they had, so that was a good reason why they should form their own club. But I've got here cuttings from the press, and they were regarded as a highly important group of people, and as you see from the cuttings from the press, Taradale bid to form club to assist widows, Cruse Club formed at Taradale, Rotarians hope to start club for widows at Taradale, that was on the 4th of the 12th 1961, Cruse Club and widows, these are not just one-liners, these are half pages. Rotarians organised club with objective helping widows. Taradale Widows Club is 1 year old. We've got a visit from Pat Phoenix from Coronation Street, who was Elsie Tanner, and she even visited the Taradale Cruse Club, and of course she got half a page. Taradale Cruse Club in drive for new members, and that was in 1968. The press were very involved in all their meetings, and anything that the Cruse Club did, the press got hold of it. Ned Holt, one of our past presidents, made a great big statement of how successful the Cruse Club was, and there again, there's Elsie Tanner again, the photo. There's another big article here from the Women's Weekly that I just picked up, Company of Cruse. Believing the newly bereaved women need more than medication and sympathy, a Hawke's Bay doctor noted London example and helped create the Company of Cruse, which was the Cruse Club photo there. So the press were very much involved in everything they did.
Peter, interesting one though, could men join a Cruse Club?
Definitely not. it was definitely a widows' club, and if men joined it, it would be putting the cat amongst the pigeons.
Excellent. So, okay, if a widow remarried, did she have to resign?
She did have to resign, yes, she had to resign, and I might add that they had a constitution, and here it is here, and any member remarries, they're no longer a member. The membership started at 2 and 6pence in 1961.
The influence of the Taradale Rotary Club, or the assistance of, so did members of the Taradale Rotary Club act in an advisory capacity to assist the Cruse Club, like financial matters, legal matters?
Yes, they did. The advisory board of the Cruse Club was very important to the Cruse Club, and the initial members of the 1961, the initial members were Mr. Arthur Miller, who was the Mayor of Taradale, and there was Arthur Stafford, Ted Morris, of course, our local doctor, Fred Yeo, Mac McCalmont, who had the garden shop, and Ron Munro, who had the pharmacy, all members of our club. They were the initial advisory board members. I came on board when I was president in 1981, and as a member of the advisory board we would chair their AGMs and the odd other meetings during the year which they asked us to do. And I'd take turns with, in those days, Arthur Stafford was still around, and one or two others would take turns doing that. But the AGMs were always chaired by one of the advisory boards. And I might add that every AGM we had the Mayor and Mayoress. And I can remember a number of occasions where David Previnson and his wife came along, and also Clyde Jeffrey and his wife would come along, and they came along and they really enjoyed the day. They felt it was such an important group of people.
I had the impression, Peter, that the Cruse Club actually began in Taradale. Did it spread to other parts of the country, or was it there already?
Yes, Warren, it did begin in Taradale. It was the first Cruse Club in New Zealand, and then the one was formed in Hastings, which is a paper article about that in there, and one formed in Napier, and one formed in Taupo.
We know that they met a lot in the Cruse rooms, Taradale rooms of the Borough Council beside the Taradale Rotary Club Town Hall. Where did they meet for the first 2 or 3 years?
The first few years they met in the main street of Taradale, which wasn't completely covered with shops in those days, and there were houses along that shopping precinct, and there was the National Bank, which was in the main street, and there was a house beside it, adjacent, and they used that house for their first meetings. And they would open their house at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they just invite the widows to come and have a cup of tea and a chat.
They were there for about 9 years before they moved. And you mentioned that people just popped in to sort of make contact and get help and all the rest of it. But did it grow to the stage where the club needed activities to organise for members because it was getting bigger?
Yeah, so they advertised, well, they got all the press reports, and they advertised, and when they came to Taradale they became a little bit more proactive. When they came to the adjacent rooms to the Taradale Town Hall, they became more proactive. They had sales tables, they were always out on the street with collection days, and of course they had, very important on our annual Rotary auction, they served us breakfasts from the early morning right through to midday virtually, and they kept us going in those days.
And boy, that was needed, because they were big days.
They were big days, and there was many people in Taradale for those days.
And this is one of the ways that our club, the Taradale Club, had informal links with the Cruse Club.
Exactly.
Throughout the year, events like this, Peter.
Exactly, and if you wanted to do any like street collections or anything that the Taradale Rotary Club wanted for a bigger group, they were always there to help. So they were an amazing group of women.
It filled a good spot for these people, didn't it? It gave them the support that they wanted and the backup of the Taradale Rotary Club.
Oh, absolutely.
It had a great need.
Absolutely. And these women were very self-sufficient. They didn't really need the advisory group that we had, that I was in very often. In fact, they made their own decisions with their own club rules, and very rarely needed us. But they did make their statements, and they were very clear. I have a minute here, which may be quite interesting if I could read it, just how strong these women were. Now, I can read this if you like. It's a committee report written on the 2nd of November 1987. The committee met briefly after the September monthly meeting. Mrs. Mackay presided. Mrs. D. Jones, who is in charge of letting the rooms, they let the rooms to the Baptist church for a creche on a Sunday. And she let the rooms, and she joined the committee. Mrs. Jones reported that the Baptist church who use the rooms for a creche on Sunday mornings are not very satisfactory clients. Also, it came to her notice that they have been removing the small table to use in their hall, where they have their church services. After discussion, it was prepared and approved that a letter be sent to the Taradale Baptist pastor informing him the rooms will no longer be available from the end of December. Also, asking him to see that the small table is not removed from the rooms in future. A letter has been sent. So you can see how strong these women were. You didn't cross them. And the poor Baptist church, who are a very charitable group of people, ended up on the wrong side of removing a table just for the use of, In 1996, it wound up. The reason it wound up again was that the onset of the Senior Citizens Club and these other groups which catered for widows and widowers and senior citizens really came into fore, and so they were able to be absorbed into these new groups, and it was like-minded people getting together.
Peter, I was going to ask you what happened to the assets. I mean, I know they had this table, but did they have assets, and what happened?
Yes, they had assets. They had quite a few assets. Quite a large asset. Well, financially, they were in those days. Their assets were there, and they had money, and they distributed their assets to Osenham House in Palmerston North, to the Cranford Hospice, to Aged Concern, to the Women's Refuge, to the Presbyterian Social Services, which was Atify. The Friendship Centre got some, and the Save the Children got some, and that's all minuted in their final. So they distributed all that money, and they'd served their purpose, as I said before, with the Friendship Centre and senior citizens coming through, and so it was a natural coming together. As part of their final distribution of finance, they built a seat which is now placed on the corner of Pukekap and Devonshire Place, and there's an inscription on the seat which is the Cruse Club, and that is there for our future generations to remember this group of ladies.
The formation of the Taradale Cruse Club for local widows was one of those quiet but extremely effective projects carried out by the Rotary Club of Taradale back at the end of last century. It served a great need at the time, but with the growth of organisations like Senior Citizens and the Friendship Centre, the specific goals of a Cruse Club was no longer relevant. But at the time, members of our club saw a great need and successfully filled it, to the great benefit of many local widows. As an example of Rotary providing service above self, there can be no finer example.